Good evening and welcome to Ridgecrest Talk, the Thursday night edition. And we want to wish everybody Merry Christmas. Just a couple weeks away.
Weeks, yeah.
We had an election recently, and we have with us two of our former council members, actually two of the longest, to my knowledge,
yes,
who served the longest on the city council. Mr. Morgan, who served 17 years.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Halloway, who served 16 years.
That's correct.
That alone, makes them makes them very
Old.
distinguished and a lot of wisdom, a lot of history. I heard you at the council meeting that you reached out to the new members, that if any of them wanted any discussions with you, you'd be more than happy to talk to them. And knowing you, Steve, I'm sure you're the same way, that they could contact you anytime.
That's correct.
There's a lot of corporate history, but not so much the corporate history, but those outside the community that you two have made contact with, names, phone numbers, emails, and staff people that those people represent are going to be important contacts for any city council member, particularly our new ones. But anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about those 16, 17 years on the council, some of your most memorable or proud moments, and then maybe some of the unhappy or most controversial ones. A little bit about what your plans are for the future. Steve is also known locally as Mr. 4th of July with the Lions. He's done a yeoman's job there, bringing that event up to a great event here in the community.
Thank you.
So let's start with you, Mr. Halloway, since you're the youngest of the two.
Barely.
You were elected in 1997?
98.
98, okay.
I was there down at City Hall because my wife at the time was rerunning for City Council. And
The school board.
Yeah, excuse me, school board, as you were running for City Council. And I'll always remember the expression on your face when the first votes came in. And I thought you were going to fall down there for a minute when you saw that you were in the lead.
Yeah, I honestly never expected to win an election ever. I mean, I was encouraged to run by the Ridgecrest Chamber of Commerce because I was on the executive board at that time. And if you remember, we had gone through that prison debacle.
Yes.
And that had left a bad taste in my mouth because a lot of local businesses had been threatened to be boycotted by members of the community. And I also thought it was very unprofessional. I went to the one meeting where the group came to the council chambers in order to present, but we didn't even allow them to present. It was just, we don't want you to get out of here, go to.
Wow.
And I just, being new to the community, I just thought, how can, I ran on the slogan of, and I live by this, to condemn opportunity without investigation is the height of stupidity. And I thought we should at least hear what they had to say and then judge it. So combined with that, and then I had seen the movie Saving Private Ryan, and that movie had affected me a great deal because I come from a generation that kind of skid between the two big wars, and I didn't really have to make a big sacrifice. And I was reeking with guilt for weeks and months after that movie. So when this opportunity came up, I said, it's the least I could do is just take a shot at it. And never expected to win. Still is. And then it only got worse every other election. I mean, because, you just think you did something wrong. And it's just, like I say, the rest is history. But never could have predicted anything.
I remember you, though, before you ran, when you filled in for your business partner at the
Right. That's how this all started, because Bob Paroli ran for city council against Steve. And you were there.
I was there.
He went on a cruise, and I had to sit in, and he gave me these little 3x5 cards. And I think there was 11 candidates, and I was the last candidate. And they kept going in the same order. They didn't rotate it. And he had about 20-second answers, and everybody else was going about 2 minutes, so about the third answer. And Bob is very liberal, and I'm very conservative. And I finally threw up the cards and said, here's what I think Bob thinks.
But it was like having a stand-up comedian there because of his responses that time.
I had nothing to
Just
lose.
The community
That's the first time I met John McQuiston too,
Oh.
because he was there as a guest and he was running for the first time, and that friendship's maintained to this day. That's probably when I met you too. Probably as well,
Correct.
through that time. So it was some good things came out of this 16-year experience, believe it or not, along with a little pain.
So what, over those 16 years, what would you say is your top, proudest, most memorative time on the council?
Well, I think as far as achievements, the big 2 or 3, the economic development grant, the $1 million that created Ridgecrest Business Park. Now we've got 2 hotels where the TOTs generated hundreds of thousands of dollars and will generate millions over the lifetime of those 2, plus some property tax revenue. The credit union, I was the president of the credit union at the time. They built a new credit union in that business park and changed the name. And to me personally, it's not a council accomplishment, but that's I have a great sense of pride when I see that building when I drive by. I've always been very proud of the Ridgecrest Solar Park that we brought, and that's another item that's going to continue to pay revenues. A couple things we did that people may not think a whole lot about that were huge, though, is we refinanced our redevelopment bonds twice, not just with TAB funds, but one time prior, and that saved the city millions of dollars that most people would never realize. And even the TAB funds now, although they seem for whatever reason to be somewhat controversial, that was an incredible effort by the council, and we literally got, in essence, free money it didn't cost the residents of Ridgecrest anything, and now the state of California has taken on the burden of repaying those TAB funds. So anything we do with those TAB funds at this point, I realize there's controversy about streets, economic development, maintenance facilities, parks and recs or whatever, but that's all, house money, so to speak, because there's no liability to Ridgecrest residents from those fundings. And personally, another little one that hasn't paid big dividends yet, but I think will, hoping the new council picks up the ball and runs with it. We got a plethora of information from the USA Swimming Workshop that has set a path forward where we can make that pool facility functional for probably about 10 more years and then create programs around the facility that will generate
Unfortunately, we got to go to a break here.
Okay.
But when we come back, we'll continue with you, okay?
Okay.
And then we'll move on to you, Steve. Same thing. So don't go away. Come back. Join us here Thursday night, Ridgecrest Talk. I'm Al Huey, partner, Robert Eierman. We'll be right back.
And welcome back to the Thursday evening edition of Ridgecrest Talk. I'm Robert Eierman, along with co-host Al Huey, and this evening we're honored to have with us former Councilman Steve Morgan and Chip Halloway. And we've been talking with Chip. We're going to move on to talk with former Councilman Morgan. Steve, what do you feel was the most significant or accomplishment during your term on the council?
Well, I think the first thing I absolutely have to mention, and it's something Chip was going to bring up, is the BRAC process with the base and with the community, and showing the people back east that we mattered and that we were a very viable and professional organization from top to bottom. They couldn't beat the numbers. They just couldn't beat the numbers that we put in front of them. So that was huge for this entire community, and that was a team effort. I'm very proud of that. One of the things that people wouldn't think about, as far as me, when I first came on council in 1996, and remember I'd been a planning commissioner 2 years before that, thanks to William Layler, because I lost my first election. I looked at China Lake Boulevard and I said, I really want to put curb gutter sidewalk up and down China Lake Boulevard. If anybody remembers what China Lake Boulevard looked like back in 1996, a lot of blank spaces in there. And I'm very proud of the fact that we didn't make it 100%, but you Go down China Lake Boulevard now. Curb, gutter, sidewalk along the whole thing. It makes the town look clean, makes the town look professional. When people come into China Lake or come into Ridgecrest, they see that infrastructure in place, and I'm very, very proud of that. Obviously, I'm very proud of the fact that we did finally achieve the Measure L and the committee that was formed along with it. Unfortunately, very controversial, very emotional values, but I think people are now seeing what Measure L was tasked to do. They're seeing asphalt on the road. They're seeing the police vehicles on the street with the Measure L. Even though it was bantied about very negatively, no one's been able to prove a single dime of Measure L was misplaced. Our finance department's done a very good job and still working at coming out with those numbers and making it very clear for everybody. So I'm very proud of Measure L. Remember, we tried twice before and lost. If we had gotten either of those earlier, where would we be today?
That's a good point.
That's water under the bridge, but we're now moving forward. I am very, very proud of the fact that Gary Parsons was able to bring in Marshall's and Joann's and Famous Footwear to this community. We have a rotating door in Ridgecrest. You look back at the businesses that came and left, the Helig Myers, the Miller's Outposts, all the stores that came in, gave Ridgecrest a shot, and it wasn't that they weren't profitable, they just didn't make enough profit. And we keep trying to change that dichotomy in this town. We have another opportunity here. I'm very proud of those 3 stores. I'm very proud of the business park. I'm very proud of the fact that I can say that over 17 years, I had an outstanding working relationship with the staff of the city of Ridgecrest. I was able to sit down with those folks and have intimate conversations about things, mostly that they would not speak to other councilmen about. And I'm very proud of that because they knew that when we sat down behind closed doors and had a conversation about things that were going on, they knew they could trust me. And I am exceedingly proud of that, along with my hard work with my fellow council members, getting to know a guy like Chip, trying to run behind him as he ran around finding new and different ideas for this community. He really did outstanding work, and people don't understand the amount of effort he put in. I was proud to be a teammate with him for all those years.
Jackie Gleason and the Honeymooners always coming up with this hot idea, to make a buck.
Take the fish, put the man in. Bring up, you did something you're not giving yourself credit for that is still paying dividends too. The trip to England and the Royal Air Force. That's paid dividends.
Yeah. That's
over
true.
And over and over.
Back in 2000, very controversial. It was very controversial. It cost about $13,000 total airfare. But I went back and I spoke to the British Hercules Operation Evaluation Unit. I spoke to their command. Also, the Joint Attack Tactical Units. We went with a local hotelier, Scott Brown. And when we had created this trip through a member of the British Air Force, the base wasn't enamored at first. Let's just put it that way. Mm-hmm. When they figured out we were going, whether they were or not, they decided to tag along. And I was specifically told that I couldn't talk about the base. I could not represent the base because I worked for the base. Of course, the first thing the British asked was, well, what can you give us on the ranges? Well, all bets were off then. And I think it's been a very, very positive aspect for this community. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in this community with them coming here, staying in the hotels, booking the automobiles, eating in our restaurants, and buying product. They come with an empty airplane. They leave with a full airplane of product, and a lot of it is bought right here in Ridgecrest.
And then they're talking about it back home, and others that might get interested and bring their missions over here.
Absolutely, and now they've even expanded to working out of Inyakern Airport, which is a great economic boon for the airport.
Yes.
So that kind of works right into the entire theory that if you just show them what you have, if you're sincere and you're honest about what you can provide, you're going to be successful.
Yeah, and that has really been successful. In fact, I know a lady that used to work here in town that wound up marrying one of those Brits that came to town after he came a number of years, and then he moved here, and so yeah, that was a wonderful thing.
It's been a wild ride, up and down. We're going to talk about some of the downs here pretty quick, but the overall work effort. I'm proud of the entire package. I said at the beginning, and I said at every election, I want to please 50.1. Now, I may have dived down to the .1 at the end here, but
your problem, Steve, is
we're
you
going to
just
have
don't have enough passion.
we're going to have to stop you right there. We'll be right back after this break with some more Ridgecrest talk with Steve Morgan and Chip Halloway.
Well, welcome back to Ridgecrest Talk, Thursday night edition. Robert Eierman and myself, Al Huey. And we're honored to have with us again former council members Steve Morgan and Chip Halloway. And we've been talking about some of the high points of their careers and time on the council. And before we left, I was talking about, Steve's problem is he doesn't have enough passion. And if there's one thing that people connect with Mr. Morgan is his passion. Matter of fact, when it got interesting is when there was some passion on the other side. It was like two bulls.
That's okay.
Head to head.
That's what it's about.
And on our program here, we like to be hard on the issues but soft on the people. So there's no problem with getting passionate on the issue, but which is hard to do. I understand. It can be taken personal sometimes, and you got to try to back off, and so does the public. You can be hard on the issues, but don't attack people. Anyway, so over your years on the council, we'll start with you this time, Mr. Morgan. Some of the low points, controversial points that you were involved with in the 17 years you were on the council.
Well, I mentioned the trip to England, which was very controversial at the time. Even getting involved in the League of California Cities was very controversial for some people. They didn't think that taking trips to Sacramento would be very beneficial for the community. Getting involved with Kern Cog as intimately as I got was very controversial because people thought, well, wait a minute, you're over there and you're agreeing with Taft, or you're agreeing with Wasco, or you're agreeing with Bakersfield on money that they need to do their projects, and you're not fighting hard enough for us. And controversial, yes, but you have to understand, you have to build the bridge to cross it.
That's right.
And so that's what you do, and it takes time and effort. Measure N and Measure I. Those two controversial measures before Measure L passed.
Sales tax.
The sales tax initiatives. Very, very controversial, but very necessary for our community, unfortunately, because of the situation that communities are in because of Prop 13 and other issues with our state. We can talk about waste management and bin sanitation. That while I was mayor, I went up to Sacramento and got my head cut off by the Consolidated Integrated Waste Management Board because
we don't know much about that. Maybe you could share with us.
Yeah,
It was so bad they had to reach
in the community.
We didn't bring it up.
In the community, it was, you're not doing enough to show them that we have met our numbers. In Sacramento, in front of that board, it was, you've done nothing to prove you're doing anything for recycling.
Well, today, though, in defense of the DTOM yellow shirt people, and it still holds today because I still take my trash out there. They don't ask you if you're from the city of Ridgecrest, Inyokern, Trona, Is
Los
this household
Angeles,
or business?
Yeah.
So how in the
Right.
can they
Hey,
tell
hey.
what is going into the landfill other than the
They don't
trash
care.
trucks?
They
No,
don't
well,
care.
I'm saying
They don't care about diversification. They told me as much. You know, we made several trips privately, and privately they'd never say this in public. It's all about the programs. It's
Oh, yeah,
all about
okay.
creating an environment and education. And as long as the programs are in place, the diversification they assume will take care of itself. But at the end of the day, the diversification was never the issue, because if you remember, it used to frustrate me because 80% of your diversification came from commercial. And we were putting the most burden on the residential side where you could never get your diversification. And that's what frustrated me about the whole process. Now, at the end of the day, I think the Ridgecrest residents are in pretty good shape. And we
Yes.
found out something we would have never found out. I mean, Ben Sanitation would still be here today, operating however you know, depending on what side of that issue you believe, they'd still be operating the way they had for 20 years, and that would have been unfair to the community. So, and we uncovered something we probably would have never uncovered otherwise. But the level of service we have is fantastic as far as
Yeah.
I understand.
And I just want to point out that although it was a major fight at the time, let me just phrase it this way: when the council made their move and went to the voluntary trash and everything, and the outcome, even though we were on opposite sides, was beneficial to all of us. And so far, the community as a whole has saved over $6 million by the effort of the citizens and the effort of the council.
And we are the only city in Kern County that has voluntary recycling and
Right.
solid waste pickup. We're the only ones because the
Correct.
council listened to the community. That's what they wanted. They wanted the option. What's your controversial issues, Mr. Holloway?
I don't know about controversial, but what's depressing to me was, you know, if you look at the amount of staff when we both got elected, now there was a need for some right sizing, but we have gone to the further extreme. And there's a lot of good people that are no longer at City Hall that did a great deal of work. And if it weren't for volunteers like PAC, I mean, PAC volunteers don't get enough credit in this community. We have the largest PAC organization in the entire state. And if you compare it to cities of comparable size for a ratio, we far exceed any city in the state of California. But that saves us, I think, about $500,000 a year in man hours, just our PAC volunteers. And that's very frustrating, I think, probably to some full-time employees that lost their jobs because of, you know, the efforts of volunteers filling in the gaps, you know, filing, shredding, or whatever. But to me, that's sad because, and what really is sad is the product coming out today gets criticized a great deal, but you don't understand the level of requirements have not decreased. They've increased over the years, yet staffing levels have decreased. And people really don't understand is about, I'd say 70 to 80% of staff time is regulatory compliance, whether it's getting, you know, justifying the grants that we get
we're
for
getting
money.
towards the end of the
You know?
show, and I just wanted to make one comment. Al and I did exit interviews at the polling places, and you know, it's like you said, Chip. If you run often enough, eventually you'll lose.
Yep.
And I don't think that either of you should take it personally that that you didn't win this time. I don't think it had to do with your record, your ability, who you were. It was a huge sentiment of anti-incumbent. It was, boy, we just got overwhelmed by all the people
Nationwide.
saying that. Yeah, and but especially here in town. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many people didn't vote for any of them incumbents.
Right.
Well, we've got very little time left, but I just want to say to both of you, I hope that you both stick around. You still have a lot to give to this community. The community hasn't left you just because of this last election. Again, you guys can make a great contribution to the city.
Thank you. We
All right.
appreciate that.
We'll be back next week, same time, same channel. I don't know who it's going to be, but we'll be back.
3 new councils.
So